Good evening and welcome to the December 5th. Yeah, wow.
Amazing.
Year's almost over. The December 5th, 2024 meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Calabasas. It looks like we have a full complement of commissioners except for Commissioner Mueller, who has an excused absence, as well as our city attorney and our student representative. And as a matter of fact, Noah, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Challenging.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda? And if not, do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Announcements and introductions. Any?
No.
Any? Okay, moving on. Oral communications, public comment. This is the part of the program for people wishing to address the commission on matters that are not on the agenda. I have speaker cards, I think all on item number 2. Do we have anybody else?
No
Nope.
other speaker cards.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on. Consent items, approval of the minutes of November 21st, 2024. I do have one correction. On the last page, we were adjourned to the next regularly scheduled meeting, which was December 5th, not November 21st.
I missed that.
Are there any, if there are not any other corrections, do we have a motion to approve?
I have an issue with one thing.
Okay.
For item 3, I thought we had asked that language be included, which would give the applicant, this is the oak tree issue, the option of paying the in lieu fee or planting replacement oak trees.
That exists.
But they had said originally that they were going to pay the in lieu fee, which
It doesn't matter what they say.
didn't know. No one knew.
I understand, but, and Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong. They have the option. We
still
are
have
a
the
ways away from when they have to make their decision. Whatever they said before, they will have the option, will they not?
Yeah, the condition that was in the resolution already included that flexibility.
Where is it in the resolution?
In the resolution that the commission acted on, that condition already had the
Oh,
flexibility.
I see what you're saying. Okay, the resolution, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There was an option
As
there.
long as they still have that option. Okay.
Always. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved with the correction you made.
Yep.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes of the meeting of November 21st. It's approved. Okay. Moving on to public hearing item. This is item number 2 on the agenda. It's file number SPR 2024-006, VAR 2024-002, and OTP 2024-007. It's a request for site plan review, oak tree permit and variance to construct a 5,393 square foot accessory structure in the rear yard, inclusive of a basement level and first floor above grade, 216 square foot guard post in the front yard, 1,165 square foot basement addition below, an existing 729 square foot detached garage that is to be demolished and reconstructed, and a 772 square foot addition to the first and second floors of the existing 13,686 square foot two-story single-family residence with 1,342 square foot garage located at 25344 Prado de la Felicidad within the residential single-family zoning district. The project would encroach into the protected zone of one heritage oak tree and involves a request for a variance for construction within 50 horizontal feet of the mapped significant ridge line. We have a presentation.
We do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. First off, I want to mention that the public hearing notices for this project were mailed to all property owners within 500 feet of the subject site, was posted on the city's website, and throughout the city at all required locations. Staff has not received any public correspondence regarding this project, and additionally, story poles were installed a little over 4 weeks ago in accordance with the city's story pole guidelines and procedures. I do also want to mention that in March of this year, a separate permit, file number APR-2023-018, was approved, allowing for construction of a 968 square foot addition, which will bring the total square footage of habitable space to 13,689 once completed. So starting with an aerial view of the project location, we have the property right here outlined in green, and it is located on Prado de la Felicidad within the residential single-family zoning district on a view lot within the estate lots of the Oaks HOA. As you can see from the image, the site is approximately 1.5 miles from the nearest scenic corridor, which is Las Virgenes Road right here. And to the north, east, and west of the residence are existing single-family homes, and to the south of the residence is protected open space owned by the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, or MRCA. And to provide a bit more context, an agreement with MRCA was approved in 2004 when the estate lots were approved for development, and this agreement established height restrictions for certain properties within the estate lots, known as the view lots, to ensure current and future development would not be visible from Malibu Creek State Park. MRCA has reviewed the project and provided their approval, which was included on sheet A-1.2 of Exhibit A in the packet. Additionally, if granting a variance on Prado de la Felicidad seems familiar to you, that would be because a few variances on this street have been granted in the past. 2 were granted at this property right here, 1 for one of the properties here, and 1 right here as well. So to give a bit more visual of, sorry, skip this slide. So here we have a close-up view of the existing site. You can see in this image there's the roof line of the existing residence. There's a attached garage right here, a detached garage here, an existing sports court, a pool cabana, a trellis, and other existing accessory features such as a pool, fire pit, and other existing landscape and hardscape. Shaded here in purple is that area of addition that was previously permitted earlier this year. And then in the front yard is an existing heritage oak tree, and in the rear yard are additional oak trees. I do also want to mention that at the rear of the property, you can see the existing berm right here. So to provide a bit more of a visual of the areas of work as we move further into the presentation, shown here is the area of the garage that's going to be demolished and remodeled, and a basement below. Shown in yellow is the area of the approximate area of the proposed accessory structure. Shown in blue is an existing trellis to be demolished and remodeled. Shown in a few spots in orange, here at the front of the residence, we have a guard post, a second-story addition right here, and a small 100 square foot addition right here. And I'll go into more detail as we get into the presentation. So starting with a few photos, here we have a few photos of the front of the residence. On the photo on the left, you can see a heritage oak tree, which already is surrounded by the protective fencing. There's the existing driveway entry gate. You can slightly see the top of the existing garage that's going to be demolished and remodeled right here, along with a side of the house and the area of the guard post. And then up to the right is another view of the residence as viewed from the street. Here we have a couple photos of the backyard of the residence. Here we have the existing sports court, so you can see that it is already below grade. And then shown here, we have the rear of the residence, and you can see a trellis, slightly see a trellis right here in this location. This is an existing outdoor terrace on the second floor currently that has a trellis above and will be one of the areas of addition on the second floor. So this proposal includes construction of a 5,393 square foot accessory structure in the rear yard with a basement level and first floor above grade, a 216 square foot guard post in the front yard, a 1,165 square foot basement addition below the existing 729 square foot detached garage that will be demolished and reconstructed, a 772 square foot addition to the first and second floors of the existing residence. The project also includes the addition of a new outdoor kitchen north of the proposed accessory structure, which will include a new barbecue, and also includes demolishing and replacing an existing trellis in the rear yard. The project would encroach into the protected zone of one heritage oak tree and involves a request for a variance for construction within 50 horizontal feet of the mapped ridgeline. And Calabasas Municipal Code sections 17.62.020 and 17.62.080 require this project be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So starting with the proposed site plan, here shown in yellow. I know it's a little small, there's a lot to fit on this slide, but here in the darker yellow will be the enclosed portion of the accessory structure that is 5,393 square feet. And then shown in the lighter yellow area is a cantilevered roof that will be above the accessory structure. Shown in the dark blue, again, is the basement, or is the garage to be demolished and remodeled with a basement below. Shown in orange here is the proposed guard post. Shown in purple is the area that's currently under construction. Shown in this small box in orange is the 100 square foot addition that will be, it will consist of 50 square feet on both the first and second floor. And then shown here, we have the second floor addition that will consist of the that existing second story terrace that I mentioned a bit earlier. It'll be enclosed to create a 672 square foot solarium. And shown in this dashed red line is the map significant ridge line. And so as you can see, the ridge line is running through the location of the main residence. And lastly, you can see the heritage oak tree with its protected zone, and then the additional oak trees in the back of the lot. So with all of the proposed additions, the project will result in an addition of 6,381 square feet to habitable space and 1,165 square feet addition to non-habitable space. This project does comply with all development standards for the residential single-family zone, including height, front, rear, and side setbacks, pervious surface, and site coverage, as provided in the technical appendix of the staff report. So moving on to the floor plans, all of the floor plans that I'm about to show have been cropped for readability just to show the area of work. But the full plan sheets can be found within the plan set, which was Exhibit A in the packets. So starting with the dark blue area, this is the 1,165 square foot proposed basement for the garage. It'll consist of 2 car lifts, 2 storage areas, and a powder room. And then moving to the area shown in yellow will be the basement level of the proposed accessory structure, which is 2,787 square feet. And it'll consist of a gym, laundry, a wet bar, powder room, a bathroom, a salt room, sauna, cold plunge, spa area, a float lab or sensory deprivation, meditation pod, and hyperbaric chamber. Also shown on this slide is a spa courtyard, a covered courtyard, and a gym courtyard. Next, we have the proposed first floor plan, which is also cropped, as I just mentioned. The darker blue area shows the garage that will be demolished and remodeled using the existing footprint, and it is 729 square feet, and you can see the 2 car lifts, additional storage, and a powder room. And then moving to the proposed accessory structure, shown in the darker yellow, is the enclosed area of the structure. And it includes a recreation room with a wet bar, bathrooms, an art studio, and a playroom. And it'll also be 2,606 square feet. Shown in the lighter yellow is the area of the cantilevered roof. That will be 1,414 square feet. And then to the north of the accessory structure is the area of the kitchen, the new outdoor kitchen that is proposed to be constructed, and consists of a wet bar, barbecue, and pizza oven. Here we have the proposed floor plans for the main residence. Starting on the left is the 50 square foot first floor addition, that it will be a powder room. Moving into the middle, we have the second floor additions. So at the top here is the area of the proposed solarium. That will be that outdoor terrace to be enclosed. It consists of a wet bar, a water feature, and there's an existing chimney. And then there will also be a 50 square foot addition on the second floor for a new shoe closet. And moving to the right, we have the proposed floor plan for the guard post, which consists of a guard area, a guard powder room, and a package room, and is 216 square feet. So moving on, we have a proposed rendering of the accessory structure, which will be more of a contemporary architectural style. You can see the outdoor kitchen area will contain stucco elements that match the existing residence. Here you can see the large metal cantilevered roof with wood elements underneath, large glass doors and windows, a green wall, and then further back in the rendering you can see the proposed trellis, which will match the style of the proposed accessory structure. The accessory structure will be 14 feet and 4 3/4 inches tall, with a basement level below existing grade. And this accessory structure will be located in the area of the existing sport court that I showed you a photo at the beginning of the presentation. Also to note is the accessory structure will have a green roof, which was noted in the elevations, which were provided in the plans. You just can't see it in this rendering. So moving on to renderings of the guard post and the addition. You can see the proposed guard post right here. It'll be designed and constructed with gray stucco and Spanish roofing to match the existing residence. There's a new driveway entry gate proposed, and then behind the entry gate you can see the top of the new garage to be reconstructed, which will also match the existing residence. And then for the proposed main residence, here in this rendering you can see the area of the new solarium, which will include window elements that match the existing residence. I do want to note that there is that 100 square foot addition will be located right here. This rendering was just prepared before that was added to the scope of work. So here we have an east elevation, which depicts the accessory structure, the garage, and the guard post in relation to each other. The basement for the garage and the accessory structure will be below grade, and the bulk of the additions will be located in the rear yard and also below grade. Additional detailed drawings are also provided in the plans. Next, we have a few other elevations to show. Starting with the garage, we have the north elevation. You can see again that the colors and materials of all of the additions to the residence are going to match the existing residence. The garage will be 20 feet and 3 inches in height. And then moving on to the guard post, this is the north elevation, so what will be viewed from the street. Again, similar to the rendering, you can see the guard post and the driveway entry gate. All of the features that are in color is what will be changed, and everything that is shaded out will remain. The height of the guard post is 16.5 feet in height. And then moving on to the elevations on the bottom of the slide, we have that 100 square foot addition right here that I mentioned wasn't included on the rendering, but you can see it'll also match the existing residence. And then again, just another elevation of the solarium. So the applicant is also requesting a variance to construct the proposed improvements on an already improved property that is located on a map significant ridge line. The code stipulates that the new construction, including additions over 1,200 square feet, shall be located at least 50 vertical feet and 50 horizontal feet from any significant ridgeline. Because the home was constructed on the map significant ridgeline prior to adoption of this ordinance, a variance permit is required for the proposed 7,546 square foot addition to the residence. And that number is inclusive of both habitable and non-habitable space. So on the slide, you can see the property is outlined in green, and then you can see the ridgeline again in orange, and you can see that it runs through the area of the existing residence. So in addition to the site plan review and variance, the applicant is also requesting an oak tree permit. As described in the oak tree report provided by the applicant, which was included as Exhibit D, there are 10 coastline oak trees located on the property that were replanted as mitigation when the project site was, these oak trees were planted on the project site when the oaks was first developed in the early 2000s. Of those trees, there's one heritage oak tree located in the front yard of the property, and the others are located in the rear yard. All 10 of the oak trees will be protected in place. However, the construction of the proposed guard post and using the existing driveway, kind of shown right here, will encroach into the protected zone of heritage oak tree number 1. The other oak trees will not be impacted because the proposed construction is beyond the protected zone of those trees. And so here we have a photo of heritage oak tree number 1. The tree was observed to be in good health with strong vigor and have a diameter at breast height of 26 inches, which is considered to be a heritage oak tree, and the protected zone of a heritage oak tree extends a distance of 50 feet from the trunk, as shown in this location map right here. Additionally, the city arborist agreed that the proposed encroachment for construction of the guard post and using the driveway for construction vehicles would likely not harm or cause any long-term adverse impact to tree number 1, and recommended approval of the project as provided in Exhibit E. So moving on to a home size comparison. This information comes from the home comparison table within the technical appendix of the staff report, which looks at homes within a 300-foot radius of the subject site. The data comes from the LA County Assessor and does not include garages. I do also want to note that the estate lots are a unique area in which large garages and other underground improvements are common, and the assessor only accounts for habitable space, so these totals do not account for total building square footage. Home sizes in the vicinity range from 6,231 square feet to 16,447 square feet, and lot sizes range from approximately 32,114 square feet to 86,791 square feet. The average home size in the vicinity is 11,889 square feet, and the average lot size is 56,011 square feet. With the proposed project, the total habitable space will be 20,070 square feet, and the lot size is 80,825 square feet. And lastly, surrounding homes are primarily two-story custom-built homes that vary in regards to architectural style, colors, and materials. So the Architectural Review Panel reviewed the proposed project on June 28th, 2024. The subject site is not located within a designated scenic corridor, and there are no architectural design standards applicable to this property. And the ARP found that the proposed project is compatible with the aesthetics of the surrounding neighborhood and recommended approval as proposed of the project to the Planning Commission. The ARP also noted that they appreciate the thinness of the roof structure for the detached accessory structure, and suggested that the guard post lighting should be studied to minimize impact to the neighborhood, which would be addressed by condition number 9 of Exhibit F. Also worth noting is that the applicant reduced the size of the proposed accessory structure by 705 square feet after receiving approval from the ARP. However, because the design and colors and materials remain the same, a second review was not required. So listed here are the 6 required findings for site plan review, and the applicant's proposed findings are included in your packets as Exhibit B. Listed here are the 5 required findings for a variance and are also included in Exhibit B. And per the Calabasas Municipal Code, at least one of the 5 findings for an oak tree permit needs to be met for an oak tree permit to be approved. The applicant has provided a response to this finding due to the request being to encroach within the protected zone, which is also included in Exhibit B. So staff concludes that the proposed project will not alter the existing use of the subject site, which is an allowed use in the RS zoning district. Compliance with the applicable development standards is documented within the written staff report. Homes within the neighborhood range in size from 6,231 square feet to 16,447 square feet. And with the proposed additions, the total habitable space of the residence will be 20,070 square feet. The ARP recommended approval of the project, and the project is exempt from CEQA review pursuant to Section 15061 and Section 15301. So the recommended action is that the Planning Commission directs staff to prepare a resolution for approval or a resolution for denial for file numbers SPR-2024-006, VAR-2024-002, and OTP-2024-007, inclusive of all required findings to support the resolution. Staff is prepared to assist the Commission in developing findings for approval or denial as required. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Extensive. I have a quick question. The previously approved 968 square foot addition, where is that in the total square footage? Is that included in the existing?
Yeah, that's included in the existing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before I open the public hearing, do we have, let's see, do we have questions? No? Okay. Dennis?
I think staff might be able to tell me that on page 17 of your presentation, the oak trees that are going to remain, are those uphill or downhill? I can't tell what the elevation of those.
They're uphill.
Uphill?
Yeah,
Okay.
The
So
slight
they
slope.
provide screening on the property from any of the view shed,
correct. Yeah.
basically to the west and north.
Yes, correct.
Thanks.
Okay, then I'm going to open the public hearing. I have 3 speaker cards. I assume that all from the applicant, on behalf of the applicant. Okay. And are you here to make a presentation or answer questions? Okay. Okay, thank you. Then if there are questions, I'll let you determine who's best able to answer those questions. Any questions?
No, just a comment.
Okay.
Get there.
Okay, let's see if there are questions first. Nope, nope.
Well, rare, but no questions as well. That's
Wow.
my question about the trees.
Boy, are you lucky tonight. Okay, since there are no questions, I'm going to close the public hearing, so last chance. Anything you want to say? Smart. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and comments.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. This is an excellent presentation. And actually, I think this is also an excellent project. I went up there and looked at it, and the berm does screen things in the back. And my only concern was the roof of that large addition, because I can't see it in the photos, but you mentioned it and they've mentioned it, that it's going to be a green roof, which to me justifies the look being a little mid-century modern as opposed to the rest of the house. But with the well, there's that other structure behind it. I forgot what that's called. The other one behind it that looks similar, and that one, and and it has a beautiful green wall, which is good. And if it had a green roof, that's even better. So I mean, I would move to approve this.
Okay, We can have a motion on the floor and then have further
Sure.
discussion. So
And
go
other
ahead.
motions. Yes, so I
Motion to approve as
as
presented.
presented. All-
And
Second.
We have a second? Okay.
Let Bob do
Any
it for me.
further discussion? The second, you can choose, we had two of them.
Yes,
Lucky
Bob.
you. Okay, Commissioner Leah seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did.
Yeah. Is there any further discussion, any questions, any discussion, then let's,
Well, I do have a question.
Okay.
It's not relevant other than to my understanding of it. The photo that's up on page 12 on the computer screen right now, does that indicate a fescue grass, or is that a plastic grass?
I believe it's a natural grass,
Hold on,
or
hold
grass,
on,
but
hold
I think that
The
applicant.
lawn is a natural.
hold on, because we don't have an open public hearing, so,
The staff will answer.
yeah, it's, you can kind of throw it out that way, and we'll get it from,
It's a natural grass per the landscape plans.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0.
And for clarity,
Congra-
that's to direct staff
To
to
direct-
return with a resolution for approval.
Absolutely, yeah. So, congratulations. What will happen is staff will return at our next meeting, and the technical approval will be then. All right, thank you. Okay. Let's move on to item number 3. Item number 3, the Green Building Code discussion. Glenn, will you be enlightening us? Okay.
Sorry, the microphone's off. I will. Give me just a second here.
Sure.
That was a stunning estate, was it not? That was nice. That was a nice project. I gotta admit.
Hope they don't move to Hidden Hills like.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm ready now.
All right.
Thank you.
Take
And
it away.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I don't see my presentation coming up on the screen here. There we go. And just before I start a brief presentation here, I'll take us back a little bit. This discussion started in September, and if you'll remember that we talked about Title 17 and our Green Building Ordinance, which implemented LEED for new non-residential development. And we talked about in that discussion the fact that that was adopted in 2003, a long time ago, and then since then we had a green building code that came online and became a semi-redundant set of standards with non-residential development. And in fact, the green building code expanded on that to include even residential development as well. Within that discussion, I believe the commission was leaning towards recommendations for removal of the Title 17 standard in favor of the Green Building Code. But since there are Tier 1, what are called Tier 1 and Tier 2 requirements, this commission was interested in learning a little bit more about those, and I took the opportunity to kind of make this more of a Green Building Code focused discussion. So that's kind of what brought us here. And by the way, the Green Building Code, I've spent the last couple weeks going through it. It's very complex. I can't even tell you right now that I understand 100% of it. And certainly when you start diving into some of the details, the engineering that's involved in some of this is really incredible. And I'll give a lot of kudos to our plan checkers to get through all this stuff when these projects go through. So I'm going to keep today's discussion on more of a high level, just to give you a basic understanding of the Green Building Code and what Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards are. I did include references, and one of the handouts was the mandatory standards, and I apologize that 11 by 17 is still very hard to read, but I included it as an exhibit because I couldn't get any bigger. But I ended to include also a hyperlink to the actual code, so easier to read than that. So I hope you're able to get through some of that. The Green Building Code was the state standard. The state's adopted Green Building Code. It's called Cal Green. This code applies to planning, design, operation, construction, and occupancy of all new buildings or significantly renovated buildings. It addresses basically 5 topic areas: planning and design, energy efficiency, water efficiency and conservation, material conservation, and environmental quality. Basically a lot of the same things that are in the LEED rating system. And I included this in your staff report, but this kind of expands on those topics. So you can see here with planning and design, for example, it addresses erosion control, stormwater drainage and retention systems, and preservation of existing vegetation. Not listed here is EV charging. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today as an example. Energy and efficiency, which is your Title 24 compliance, and some of the measures down here that lead to Title 24 compliance, such as window glazing, R-value insulation, even cool roofs would contribute to that, and energy efficient HVAC. Water conservation policies that include excuse me, both indoor and outdoor water use. So indoor focuses a lot on low flow plumbing fixtures, efficient water heaters, recycled water systems and such. And then outdoor focuses on basically your MWELO requirements, right? Your drought tolerant landscaping, your water budgets, irrigation controllers that are high efficiency, and then drip irrigation. Material conservations focus in on recycled content in building materials, sustainably sourced materials that'd be like certified wood. Construction waste diversion, which we've been doing here for quite a while, even before I think the Green Building Code came online. And then reuse, if possible, of existing building materials. Indoor air quality deals kind of with the health of the occupants, which are low VOC, paints, adhesive sealants, no formaldehyde in the carpets, things of that nature, proper ventilation to filter out and flush out contaminants, moisture control to prevent mold, and then again your higher efficiency air filters for pollutant control. And protecting that HVAC when you install it. So Cal Green applies to basically all new construction, residential alterations and additions that increase the building's conditioned floor area, non-residential additions greater than 1,000 square feet, and non-residential additions that are valued at more than 200,000 square feet or $200,000. There are separate measures and requirements for residential and non-residential development, and for the mixed-use projects, we've seen a few of those this year. Cal Green actually applies to both components of that separately. So that has residential standards and non-residential standards, and they will each apply to a mixed-use development independently of those components. So basically, Cal Green standards are mandatory. No getting around those. And then you have Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards that are additional. They're voluntary, and they're additional to the mandatory standards. And they introduce also some elective standards that together encourage a higher degree of sustainability. As I mentioned, Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards are voluntary, not required. However, if they're desired by a local agency such as ourselves, Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards must be formally adopted And then because Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards exceed baseline CBC Title 24 energy standards, the requirements also must be approved by the California Energy Commission, and a big part of that requires a cost-effectiveness study that we'll have to prepare and submit to the Energy Commission. So I have basically 3 examples of the standards just to kind of give you the idea of what Tier 1 and Tier 2 do. The first one is EV charging. So the base standard for a non-residential development, and there's a chart in there. So these requirements change with the number of parking spaces that are required for that development. So I chose the highest number, which is a 201 or more category, and that project would be required to provide 20% of the actual number of parking spaces as what's called EV capable, which, and that's a lot to unpack, so I didn't include it here, but it involves the panels, the amperage of the circuitry, and the stub outs for the EV chargers themselves. Does not require the actual charger. And 25% of those EV capable spaces must have what are called EV supply equipment or the actual chargers. So 25% of the 20% would actually get a charger. So if we were to take this to a Tier 1 requirement, again, keeping the 201 more parking spaces, that project will be required to provide 30% of the actual number of parking spaces as EV capable, and then 33% of those EV capable spaces must have the electric vehicle supply equipment or the charger itself. So as you can see, it tiers up. It builds off of a base standard and requires a more stringent standard. Tier 1 would also require a 35% of the total number of parking spaces to be reserved for cleaner vehicles as a prerequisite. So, and I bring this up as an example because in addition to taking base standards and then improving on those, it adds additional prerequisite standards into the mix. And then on a broader scheme, like EV charging is in the site development category, so it would also add on an elective standard. So, and I'm not going to really go into those tonight, I hadn't planned on that, but in addition to building off standards, adding in additional standards, it then has you choose an elective standard from a list that are related to that specific division of the building code. So moving on to the Tier 2 standard of the same kind of development here, that standard would be 45% of the actual number of parking spaces as EV capable, and then 33% of the EV capable spaces would need to have an electric vehicle supply equipment or a charger. And then a Tier 2 would require even more, 50% of the total number of parking spaces to be reserved for cleaner vehicles as that prerequisite. Moving on to my second example for construction waste reduction. This is a little simpler to apply. So our mandatory measure, which needs to be complied with, is recycle and or salvage for reuse 65% of all non-hazardous construction and demolition waste, or to meet a local construction and demolition ordinance, whichever is more stringent. Tier 1 actually uses the same percentage, but this now needs a third-party verification, so a little bit more formal than just the standard, tell us what you're doing. And then Tier 2 would be to recycle or salvage for reuse 80%. So again, as you can see, it kind of tiers up. That also would need third-party verification. And my third example is for water conservation. So the basic mandatory measures for water conservation for non-residential buildings is that you need to include separate submeters for tenants. And there's actually a little bit more to unpack there, which I'm not going to do tonight. But basically, if you have tenants in a larger space, individual tenants that would use 100 gallons per day or more would need separate submetering for each individual tenant. In addition to what really the meat of the standard is, which is to provide a whole slew of low flow and flush fixtures, so plumbing fixtures for the building. We have that here in this building, but that would be a requirement. Tier 2 is all of the above, plus you need to beat that by 12%. So each fixture would need to be 12% more efficient or less water use than a baseline fixture. And you can do that one of two ways. These are where you get into calculations that are required to be submitted. One is a prescriptive method, which is you basically document that each individual fixture achieves a 12% reduction, and then the assumption is that then the whole building will achieve that, or a performance method, which is a whole building calculation based off a baseline water calculation and then showing us a 12% reduction. Tier 2 works exactly the same, except that you need to achieve a 20% savings in water. So that kind of ends my brief presentation, and I'll open it up to you guys for questions and discussion. But a reminder that our initial desire was to have this body give us a recommendation on changes or possible changes or revisions to CMC Chapter 17.3.4, which was the Green Building Development Standards, which was the lead-oriented part. That ends my presentation. I'm now available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I open it up for questions and comments, I have a question. And I'm missing something here. On page 5 of your presentation, I've got you that the Cal Green basic standards are mandatory. Then it says the Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards include additional mandatory standards as well as the elective standards. But then it says Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards are voluntary and not required, which kind of is a little different than mandatory. So you lost me there.
Yeah, let me break that down a little bit. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards include what's called additional mandatory standards. So the Cal Green basic standards are called mandatory standards. When you add in Tier 1 and Tier 2, they're going to add additional mandatory standards if, and this is a big question, if the city decides to adopt them. And that's what led me to bullet point 3. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 aren't required by the state. They're if we decide.
Okay,
I
so
think if they
reverse
the paragraphs, it makes more sense.
I think there's additional language. What you're saying is the Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards are voluntary to the municipality or to the
Organization.
to us,
Yes.
to the city,
Yes,
not voluntary to the developers.
correct.
Okay, got it.
Sorry, I know
I
that's
think
a
that
little
needs to
confusing.
be, that needs to be clear. I think that needs to be clarified, but I think we just clarified it.
Okay.
So it's voluntary in terms of the city can adopt the Cal Green's basic standards without Tier 1 and Tier 2. The city can also alternatively adopt the basic standards and Tier 1 or Tier 2.
One slight
Correct.
correction, the basic standards are mandatory no matter what. A development would have to comply with the basic standards. What's voluntary is just adding on tier 1 or tier 2.
Well, no, I'm talking about what the city can do. The city can adopt the basic standards, correct?
Well, it's already adopted.
It's already
mandatory.
adopted. When we adopt the building code, it's already in there.
Yeah, the building code already includes the mandatory green building requirements. So that's already a done deal. That's why that's stated tier 1 and tier 2 are voluntary. The city can choose to add tier 1 or tier 2 on top of what's already been adopted.
Well, but we've adopted it as section 17 of our code, correct?
No, because section
Chapter
17...
17.34.
Section 17 of our code is specific to the planning and zoning requirement, which is separate from the building code requirement. So the planning and zoning requirement under Title 17 says that if you have a non-residential structure over a certain square footage, then it has to meet some sort of green building requirement, and it's referencing USGBC's LEED building standards.
Right.
Which is a separate nonprofit entity, maybe for-profit, but they say nonprofit, separate entity that is not government, government-run.
Right.
So if a project moves forward right now, they have to demonstrate to the city in the entitlement stage and post-entitlement stage that they're meeting that level of compliance. Additionally, they're mandatorily, they have to meet the Cal Green requirements, which have already been adopted in the building code, which is part of Title 8 of the municipal code.
So what you're saying, it sounds like what you're saying is that Chapter 17, the provisions of Chapter 17 which apply at the planning stage, and the provisions of Cal Green, which are incorporated within the building code, they both exist, and there's a redundancy.
They currently exist, and there is a redundancy, and in fact, this is what was brought up by the council, that's why they asked the commission to look at it. Not only is there that redundancy, but if there's a conflict, then the question is, they have to follow the mandatory requirements of the building code. So the concern there is that not only is there redundancy, but there could be a conflict with the LEED requirements.
So which law rules, essentially, is what we're
So
talking
the
about.
whole idea here is to
Right now, it's
re-
both.
eliminate that redundancy and have some consistency.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
May I? I thought I understood it until the questions came up. Maybe the order of the bullet point is what's throwing me off.
It is. It's the
Okay.
order of the bullet points. The third one should be second.
Yes, I think that's the thing. Tier 1 and 2, Tier 1 or Tier 2 is voluntary to the city to adopt. Once they're adopted, their standards become mandatory. Correct? Okay. Then that's what I thought originally. All right.
That is correct, yeah. So they're voluntary unless they're adopted, then become mandatory. And I do want to correct myself. Our building code is in Title 15, not Title 8.
All right. Questions?
Can I make a comment? This city, from day one, pushed the envelope, essentially. The fact that our first ordinance was to protect the oak trees, and we just approved a project that has some of the oak trees being protected even today. And we also designed our first city hall with HEPA air filters. We didn't need to do that. And we didn't need landscaping outside, but we actually designated a park outside the old city, the rental city hall on Moreau and Las Virgenes, and now it's called a park. So there's a lot of things that we did because we thought and we knew that they were worthy of the attention of the people of Calabasas, way beyond what was required by LA County, whose ordinances we adopted. And essentially, they were our building code authors at the time, and it was convenient to adopt that. Well, today, we're facing not LA County, but the state legislature. And if you were just to look at the green building laws that are coming out of Sacramento right now, we had a presentation just 2 weeks ago in which the city manager of Westlake Village showed a slide with about 30 different laws that in some cases are competing with one another. They're all going in a direction that's kind of, you know, addressing housing issues and green issues and all the other stuff, but there's 900 pages of legislation that people like us, who are kind of responsible for dealing with these issues, would have a really hard time in reconciling all those things. So there's movement in what Glenn is telling us here, whether it's just shifting the order of bullet 1, 2, and 3 on this page 5. It's really, what do we want, and where are we going, and how does what we want fit within the efforts that are coming out of Sacramento and DC? I mean, because the funding ultimately comes from Washington and the legislature to the states, and then they figure out what to do. And, you know, if you want to participate in Calabasas or Hidden Hills or Agoura Hills, you have to at least wrestle with the issue of Tier 1 and Tier 2 mandatory as an aspirational goal. So the aspirational goals are changed because we're killing ourselves with greenhouse gases on the planet and wiping out our sea stocks, and our forests are burning up and all this other stuff going on. So Glenn and Michael and the staff have to figure out, all right, what of this legislation are we going to think about for ourselves? What do we think we can accomplish? Let's not do something we can't either accomplish or enforce, because when you say mandatory, that means those folks who just wanted to, you know, tear down their garage and build a, you know, a basement and a garage on top, you know, they would face a very different thing if we were right now required to be mandatory on Tier 1 and Tier 2. And tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lawyer, you know, if we recommend to the council that we be most ambitious, and let's say Tier 2, and some of these options we just talked about, where we're looking at 80% with a bonus, you know, for the state goals of another 10% or whatever it is, 65 and up. Oh, it's back on page 6. 20, you know, a mandatory measure, 20% with a 25% of those EV capable spaces having, I mean, it's just, who can cope with all this stuff? So in a way, we're being asked, staff has done a good job, I think, of showing the practicality of what's being asked, the order of the you know, the presentation, in fact, might be a simple solution in the one case, as you suggest, you know, but ultimately, we're still deciding on, you know, what are we going to do to deal with GHGs, no housing, burned forests, and bad sea. So it's a tough go for this planning commission and for the city, any city in California or elsewhere in the country. And we in Calabasas have always been very progressive and self-constraining. You know, we actually do those things, and sometimes it bites us. So enough talk about it, but at the same time, you know, the council wants us to help them, help the staff, you know, take whatever budget is necessary from what I'm gathering and spend time and try to cope with all this stuff. Tell me if I'm wet on this thing or not.
Well, you're not wrong, and I can actually add a little bit more perspective too, because this state has standards for reaching net zero in basically in CO2 reduction. I think by 2045 was the year that they were shooting for. The Green Building Standards Code is part of the equation of the state, along with other legislation, as you'd mentioned. And so even the basic standards, as every 3 years a new building code's adopted, are going to keep getting more stringent. It's a trend that we've seen to this day, and I believe that trend's going to continue to achieve the state's goal. Obviously there's a lot of committees and commissions and legislators gotta vote on this stuff and put it in place. But that's the trend we're seeing, and I do believe it's going to continue to eventually what's in the building code in general will get us to that net zero goal in California. So the idea here is, do you want to get out in front of that as a city, or do you want to pace with the state? I think it's kind of the bottom line here.
And I do want to clarify one thing. Are we tasked tonight with dealing with commercial projects only, or commercial and residential? I want to be clear on that.
Well, technically, you're only tasked with looking at Title 17, which relates to non-residential. The California Green Building Code relates to all structures.
Yeah.
So whatever changes you make will apply to everything. Or not. So just to also clarify, Title 17, planning, Title 15 is ultimately council. So we're not asking the commission to recommend any sort of ordinance on Title 15, but the commission can certainly make a suggestion that the council consider, right? Consider looking at Tier 1 or Tier 2 within the building code requirements.
All right. Something?
Yes.
Yeah.
As you may recall, at the last time we reviewed this, I was in favor of, even though I wrote the green building ordinance, I was in favor of replacing it because it's redundant. But my first question is on the outlets for the electric vehicles. Is there some reason why, can we ask for more? I mean, to me, it seems like they should all be 100% capable, EV capable. I know there are other numbers for the actual chargers, like 5% on basic, 10% on Tier 1, 15% on Tier 2, but is there some reason why if they're putting in the infrastructure, electric conduits or something, is there some reason why every single parking space can't have an outlet?
I think the easy answer is, yeah, you can. The city, if it chooses to, can take the basic building code and adopt amendments that are more strict than it.
Okay,
We will always have that ability.
I mean, I would still do it on the thresholds of the sizes of the projects and the projects that are subject to, Tier 1 or Tier 2 or
Well,
whatever.
with the caveat that would be considered a REACH code, and we would have to get approval from the California Energy Commission. Practically speaking, it's not that simple because it's not just running a conduit, it's also making sure that the electrical panel is large enough to accommodate 200, 220 amp outlets. That's
right.
not a simple endeavor.
Got it. Okay. So so that is a good answer.
And then in conjunction with
That's a good
that,
answer.
how great is the burden on the developers if you're requiring 100% capability?
That goes into the equation that the city would have to submit to the California Energy Commission.
Right, so if we go to Tier 1 or Tier 2 regardless, and of course I would prefer Tier 2, then it still needs their approval. It's still a process, is there a way to, my only other question is on natural gas. Actually, Tier 2, I wonder if it would affect that big lawn that Dennis pointed out in that last project, because they have to reduce water, and that was a lot of turf.
Well, it may.
That's a huge amount of turf there.
Every parcel gets a water budget through MWELO, and that's administered by the district. I mean, we can look for MWELO requirements, but it may, right? I don't know. I mean, there's certain types of turf that are.
I mean, I guess they can afford it, but it's like, it just seems wrong that, anyway.
Well, technically, that's separate from the building code. As Glenn pointed out, there's another state law that regulates landscaping requirements like that.
Okay.
And they have to meet a certain irrigation budget.
Okay. But there was a water issue, and
correct.
There was a water threshold.
Well, MWELO is wrapped up into the Green Building Code as well.
Okay.
So it's redundant there.
So then my only other question, and again, I'm in favor of Tier 2, obviously, but my only question is there a way to prohibit natural gas in commercial structures? I mean, except in commercial structures? because I guess restaurants want it, but anywhere else? Because that's part of the problem.
Well, that may
that
actually
Dennis
be
is
a
alluding
better
to.
question for our assistant city attorney, because there was a Berkeley judgment that came down that basically, I think, struck down a law in Berkeley, a reach code that prohibited natural gas, and that violated federal law. But I think John would know a little bit more about that.
Is there a way to do that?
The name of the case is the California Restaurant Association versus City of Berkeley, and what City of Berkeley tried to do is they knew that they could not ban natural gas appliances. So what they tried to do is say, well, you cannot extend natural gas lines to new construction, and that would solve the problem. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, you're preempted under the Energy Policy and Conservation Act from adopting that because it's affecting the use of energy, which the preemption clause of that act clearly says that that act fully covers the field with regard to the use of energy. So I guess the answer to your question is, at this point, no.
Okay,
So-
all right, so that answers that question at this point. No, it's unfortunate, because I think natural gas is a serious
Let me
problem.
just ask for a repeat of the energy policy and what, Conservation Act?
It's called the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, and if you want the code site, it's 42 United States Code 6297C.
Can we get a copy of that, please?
I can provide the commission with a copy of it.
Well, I mean, it's electronic, so I mean,
Right,
give me a link to it. so-
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, that's the last question. Again, I think we are a progressive city, and I would be in favor of Tier 2, or at least submitting an application for Tier 2.
How lengthy is the process, by the way, of getting approval?
I don't know that answer, actually. I could reach out to a couple neighboring cities to see if they've gone through that process, but we have not looked into it. I will say, so when the Cal Green came out, I think it was around 2010-ish, the city of Calabasas was the first city to actually formally adopt it ahead of the triennial building code adoptions. And we were also the first city to start implementing it. And so, you know, you've got the code requirement, but then you also have the actual implementation and enforcement. So it should give the commission some comfort to know that Calabasas practically wrote the book on how to enforce or how to implement and carry out these green building requirements within the green building code or within the building codes. And that cities from up and down the state have contacted our building official to find out how we carry that out. So my point is that even at its current standard, we are doing a great job at formally implementing it and making sure that projects are meeting these requirements.
Okay, thank you.
They like to hoist us on our own petard.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Do we have further comments? Commissioner
Yes,
Leah?
I've been looking at Tier 1 and Tier 2 from the eyes of a builder, and it would stop construction. You just cannot figure out what the costs are. Getting to Michael's thing about the parking lots, who pays for the electricity? Is it the owner, or is it going to have meters? I mean, as a builder, I would run like crazy from this because of the unknowns. Now, a question, is this something, Tier 1, Tier 2, that you have to adopt on day one, or could you adopt it down the road?
You could adopt it down the road.
I
Sure.
would then say, at best, let's see what the experiences or other cities. I mean, otherwise, we will do what we haven't been. I wish it would apply to residential. It would stop construction. It would just freeze it because they don't know what the cost would be.
You think they wouldn't know the cost of like running electric conduit and billing, either billing the unit?
Absolutely.
Because my daughter lived in an apartment building where the units paid for their own electricity to each space.
Look at the paragraph on page 2 of our presentation. adopt, the CEC has got to get in. It's a road unknown. And how long is it? It's a long and winding road going to God knows where. I mean,
But beside the EV charging, what are you concerned about? I mean, because
well, I'm
everything else was
concerned
just
about
reductions of
not
water
knowing
use and
what
energy.
my cost, as a proposed builder who might want to build a project, what my cost would really be. As I see this, there's no way they're going to know.
I think you have a good point that we should look at other cities that have tier 1 and tier 2 and see what their experience has
Experiences are,
been.
yeah.
Well, and I think
Right
that's
now,
a-
I'm only familiar with some of the larger cities that have the tier 1, tier 2, so it's not going to be easy to get a hold of them, but I could reach out to our smaller local cities to see if any of them have gone past the mandatory. But I will say to Commissioner Leah's point, the other aspect too is availability of materials, availability of equipment to meet these higher thresholds can also be a challenge. I know personally, when I went to re-roof my house, I think it was around 2013, the city of LA was the only city in the area that changed from December 31st to January 1st to a higher energy efficiency composition shingle roof, and that automatically increased my cost by 30%. You know, even though I was ready to go in December, the contractor came back and said, well, I can't find, that material is not as easily sourced, so it's going to cost more to get it. So that can happen. The more stringent you make it, as you go up to tier 1 and tier 2.
If there are cities though with tier 1 and tier 2, and you said there's some large ones, like what? You have to tell, then the materials must be more available now. What are the
They
large
could be.
ones?
I do believe LA City might have tier 1, but I'd have
Wow.
to double check it.
So staff needs to look into it, but if LA has tier 1, that obviously isn't a problem.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Leah that it would seem to make sense to do what we need to do to eliminate the redundancy from Chapter 17 to the building code, clean that up so that so that there's some consistency there, working within the basic standards of Cal Green while we see what other cities have or have not been able to implement and how it's working out. And to me, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we already approved the first part at a previous meeting, but maybe you weren't here. But we already approved taking out the green building ordinance.
Taking it out?
No,
No.
Just to be clear,
no.
there wasn't a motion
I don't believe so.
and a vote on that.
Oh, but there was a
So tonight,
but there was a consensus.
if we can.
Seem to be leaning that way.
Yeah, what we're seeking from a direction standpoint is if there's consensus to move forward with an ordinance, we can bring forward an ordinance removing the green building standard from Title 17. So just strike that from Title 17, and that's no longer within that. And then moving forward, again, so that could be an ordinance that the commission can render a recommendation on to the council. That would clean up Title 17. In addition, if the commission would like to also make a suggestion or a recommendation that the council consider tier 1 or tier 2, we would put that in there, and then if the council agrees, they would direct staff to pursue that. We have to update our building codes every 3 years. I think we're about a year, maybe even 2 years into it. I think a year, actually. So this could be a good time to start looking at that to see if, for the next update, we want to go to tier 1 or tier 2, again, with the council's formal direction to pursue that.
So if we remove that from Chapter 17,
Recommend it.
well, of course, if we recommend, well, if council removes that from Chapter 17, does that leave a void? Or does the fact that
No.
it's in the building code, that the basic standards of Cal Green are in the building code, that picks it up?
Cal Green's already in the building code, so there's no void.
I mean, as I said, when I wrote that, there was no Cal Green.
At that time-
There was
Yeah.
nothing.
Correct.
Yeah.
If we,
Only Santa Monica had a very thick,
Yeah,
or
if you-
guidelines.
If you
and that's it.
didn't have that prior to, I want to say 2010 or 2013, then there would be a void.
Yeah.
But now that it's in the
building
building code, there's
code.
no void.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, go ahead.
So we have 3 examples of standards here in front of us: construction waste reduction, EV charging, and water conservation, each of which has a tier 1 or tier 2 option. How many examples have this tier 1 or in tier 2 option that are not present in this presentation? Are we talking dozens? Are we talking a few more? Are we talking?
You mean how many standards exist that are tier 1 and tier 2?
Exactly. Because we have 3 examples here in the presentation.
I haven't counted them. A lot.
A lot. Dozens, over 100?
Could be 100.
Okay. My second question is, if we choose tier 1 or tier 2 or neither, does that apply to every single one of these standards? Or can we mix and match? Can we say we want tier 1 for water conservation, for example? Or do we want tier, I know, it's a lot of work. I know, I have to ask. Because I mean, some I agree with, some I
And I
don't.
wish I had an answer for you on that. My basic understanding is you adopt tier 1 or tier 2 and all those standards apply.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
we'd have to run that.
I think Glenn, I believe Glenn is correct. It's either tier 1 or tier 2, or it's all or none,
Yeah.
with the exception of amendments. So you can make local amendments. So if you're just very focused on the one specific issue, again, Berkeley was focused on the natural gas, so they made that local amendment to the building code on that one particular issue.
Commissioner, I would make note that if you do local amendments, you do have to make other sets of finding regarding local topographical geological features that require the amendment to the building code. So that's just something else that would need to be done if you want to do something different than the standard building code that's presented by the Building Standards Commission.
And you also do open the city up to being challenged for that.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask, what are the consequences in time and money in dealing with these issues? Right now, we're talking maybe 3 or 4 large components, to Matt's point, but if there are 100 things that we have to consider, whether it's atmospheric or it's soil or it's technological innovation, implementation, blah, blah, blah. We just approved cameras and kiosks in the commercial shopping centers in town. And that's because we know that it can be of benefit to our community, but there's a cost. And then we can't argue about the cost if somebody in a commercial environment like that wants to pay for those cameras and hook them up to the sheriff's department, which doesn't really want to budget for that all over LA County, on and on. So here we are talking about what kind of self-constraint do we want to add to our current burden? And
Well, but to Bob's point, we don't really know yet what the costs are on tier 1 and tier
and
2.
you can't.
But we need to see what other cities, what's going on in other cities.
If you're talking about water, cities almost have nothing to do with water. We got a water district that
Well,
deals
I mean,
with
we know
water and
that
sanitation.
we know that LA has tier 1 apparently, and obviously they're building, so that's not an issue. But I don't know what tier 2 cities there are.
I mean, we do know the cost will be higher at the very
High-
least,
yes,
no matter
higher.
what, so.
Of course, just, it won't necessarily be 30% higher, but we don't know on each individual component. And there was a shortage, just like when I built my ADU, all of a sudden there were no bricks, and there was no concrete. There were,
Right. And as I mentioned
different.
earlier, an application to the Energy Commission will be accompanied by a cost study
Which you
that
have
they
to pay
look
for.
at, which we're going to have to pay for.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
on 100 different
So
variables.
we'll have to do that study to figure out exactly what it is you're asking for right now.
So
right?
can we separate this somehow and just adopt the basic, or recommend, I should say? We already have the
Well,
basic.
it
but-
sounds like we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we have consensus, and therefore I'm going to call for a motion regarding recommending what we discussed, which is removal of the existing standards from Chapter 17.34 which will remove the redundancy and any inconsistencies for now, and maybe direct staff to do what can be done in terms of contacting other cities that may have implemented tier one and tier one and or tier two, to see how it's working out, what kind of costs are involved, et cetera. Yeah.
I don't think we need to do the search. We should ask our Council of Governments to do that search because it affects all of us on the 101 and PCH. And there are other cities, Thousand Oaks, Camarillo, and even LA, you know, that are coping with all this stuff coming out of Sacramento right now. So I would suggest that we do the least amount, and I think removing that constraint from Chapter 17 is probably the wisest current step.
Until we know more.
Until we have at least what our sister cities in the COG, which is able to find money to deal with these kinds of things regionally or in partnership. I mean, we just worked our way through an annexation process that has been a nightmare. And we've been turned down on another annexation on Agoura Road in the past for these same kinds of considerations. And the world has changed. I mean, right now, the common denominator we're really talking about is trying to save the planet from GHG pollution. And we haven't even talked about that yet. And ultimately, we're going to have to, you know, rewrite everything that we have. But I want to know, and working off of what you just said, why are we doing this? Are we looking to protect ourselves from the damage that might be caused by a developer or by the state or by the RENA process, as an example? You know, that's in the hands of SCAG, you know, Southern California Association of Governments Regional Council. They set the housing standards. Our guys have had to go down and fight to not have 700 units between now and 2030 versus the 353, of which 200 have to be affordable. Hello.
Well, I think we're doing this because it's redundant now. It wasn't in 2004 or whenever this was adopted, but now we have
cleaning-
like
The
we're-
consequences in the
Okay.
future is what I'm asking about, that's all.
Well,
Are we trying to
but
avoid
this is
some
what's-
boogeyman right now?
So it
Yeah,
sounds,
right, well, it sounds like we have some consensus
Yeah.
here. So was that a motion I just heard from you?
so
Dennis?
I'll make the
we
motion
can
if you
return.
want.
After
To
Michael
re-
tells me what
Yeah.
the motion
Yeah,
should
can-
read.
we
so,
can-
so
hold
to
on.
remove the green building ordinance.
Yes.
From
Excuse
our
me, Chair and
municipal code.
Commission.
Yeah.
This is listed as a discussion item only.
Oh,
And it's not
okay.
an action item,
Yeah.
but I believe you can formulate your consensus, which I believe staff understands, and they
Right.
can repeat it
Okay.
to return to the commission with an ordinance that removes this section that creates the redundancy. And then at that point, you can make further recommendations as to whether or not you want to recommend to the council they consider tier one, tier two, or the like.
But I would like to put a not to exceed budget limitation on that. I would recommend that to the council to say if it's going to cost us, you know, $50,000 to do that in 6 months, don't do that. You know,
But
what-
that's, we're not there yet.
We don't know that.
We're not there
But
yet.
that's what's gonna
So you
happen.
don't need, we don't need a motion.
Right.
This isn't a recommendation to go to council yet.
No, tonight's just a discussion item. So
Okay,
we
fair
definitely, we'll return with an ordinance, a publicly agendized or publicly noticed agenda item.
Thank you.
With an ordinance, and then at that time, yes, as Mr. Fox stated, we would, you know, if the commission would like to provide additional suggestions for the council to consider, then we would forward that on to the council.
Okay. All right.
Let me ask you a question now.
Sure.
Who's on the California Energy Commission?
I don't know that answer.
They're appointed by the governor, or are they appointed by some kind of electoral process? Or both?
I do not believe it's elected position. I
it's
think
the
they are
governor.
appointed,
Yeah.
but I don't know who appoints them.
And whose energy interests do they serve?
There's a loaded question.
What I can tell you is that the building codes are made up of engineers from different different disciplines. So I can't say they serve any particular interest, but I don't know about the Energy Commission.
Can we find that out and let the commission know at some point? It would be helpful.
Yeah, we can find out who's on the Energy Commission
And
and how they're appointed.
who appoints or elects them. Just like the Public Utilities Commission, you know, we're all victims of that right now because, you know, no one can get insurance on their home because of the Woolsey fire or the Mountain Fire or any of the other fires. And all of this is essentially planetarily oriented, and that's another discussion I'd like to have at some point in the near future, in 2025.
All right.
I'm going to thank AI for this answer. The governor appoints and the Senate confirms.
All of the members?
5-year terms.
Okay.
5 commissioners.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Thank you, AI.
Okay, I believe it's time to move on. Future agenda items and reports. We are on to the director's report.
Yes, so a couple things to note. For December 19th, which is the next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting, we do have public hearing notices that have been posted and published. One is for a new auto dealership at 24460 Calabasas Road, the former Sperling site, which is next to Bob Smith BMW. It's a proposed Kia auto dealership. And then we also have a conditional use permit for a vet clinic at 23637 and 23639 Calabasas Road. That's the courtyard at the Commons. So those 2 items have been publicly noticed for the December 19th meeting. And then just as an update, because this commission looked at some of the housing element programs that we were looking at implementing. The pre-approved ADU plans are in process. We did reach out to Agora Hills, and Agora had no problem with us using their plans. So then we contacted the architecture firm that developed those plans, and we contracted with them to move forward with their plans. The commission saw them there. They have 3 different floor plans and 3 different designs for each floor plan, and that was a significant cost savings to the city to be able to go down that route. The plans have been reviewed by Planning and Building and Safety, so they're currently still in the plan check process. They're not fully done yet, but they are moving forward. And with regards to the objective design standards, staff released a RFP earlier this year, consistent with the direction from the Planning Commission on what the commission's looking for in objective design standards, using the models that the commission recommended. That RFP was released and expired on November 1st. We received a lot of proposals from very good firms that are multidisciplinary. They're made up of architects and urban designers that all proposed on the objective design standards. Staff is in the middle of vetting those proposals, and once we do, we'll move forward to City Council.
Can I ask what
Okay.
the budget impact of that is going to be?
I cannot say yet, only because we have not awarded the actual contract.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do we have reports from any commissioners?
I have a couple items from the LA Times, believe it or not. One was a story here about cities that are not doing anything about soft story structures which collapse and tend to collapse in earthquakes. I don't know, does Calabasas have an inventory like that?
We don't have a formal inventory, but I know this is something that our building official and our building department is aware of. They don't have any major concerns. We don't have the same kind of construction that LA had in the 50s and the 60s. So to answer your question, no, we do not have that inventory, but we are aware of it.
Okay, and then at least you're aware, yeah, at least they're aware of it. And then the LA Times also ran a story about 8 wonderful architecture projects in the past year, and one of them, I mean, I can't really easily show you, but it's called Isla Intersections, and it consists of containers, believe it or not, shipping containers placed on top of each other, but at at slight angles, so it doesn't look like a block, and with a lot of design in it, and I just thought this might be perfect for some odd-shaped lots or affordable housing, and maybe you can contact the architects if we ever do get an affordable housing here. Their designs looked amazing to me. It's called, they're called Lorcan O'Hurley. And anyway, I have this if you want to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Anything here, Dennis?
I will not be present at the December 19th meeting. Hopefully John will be here.
Nothing?
Just want to remind my fellow commissioners, the commission appointment applications are due December 16th, and that goes as a reminder to everybody watching. If you want to come serve the city on our several commissions, submit those applications. That's how we all got here.
Thank you. All right. Seeing nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
And hearing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.